Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, it's Jesse with the Common Nerd, bringing you pop culture and all things straight through a common sense lens. And with Fantastic Four just on the horizon, boys and girls, we've just got another week or so before it hits the theaters out there, and we find out exactly how much of a disastrous dumpster fire that thing will end up being, or I will be proven completely and totally wrong, and that thing will end up making $1 billion and be start to a fresh beginning over there at the MCU. But boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, the one thing that is definitely not changing, despite all of our hopes, despite all of our dreams, despite all of our optimism out there, is Kevin Feige and all of his kind of garbage identity politics going forward. Because despite all of the other studios, despite Hollywood itself divesting itself from diversity, inclusion, and equity programs and all of the rest of the garbage nonsense that has involved the spirit of the age and what a lot of people would consider woke, well, guess what? Kevin Feige says, oh, no, ladies and gentlemen, the rest of Hollywood might be out there running and hiding, but for the future of the MCU, Marvel will continue to double down on all of its identity politics nonsense and be full-blown all about the agenda. And color us shocked there. If the trailers from Marvel's Fantastic Four don't show you that it's going to be nothing more than an MCU girl boss garbage, well, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know what to tell you at this point, but I think if you do actually end up going and see that movie in the theaters, you'll be very disappointed. But at the end of the day, you like what you like, and fans are one of our favorite things around here. But as we've seen from the disastrous dumpster fires at the box office, as well as the ratings that have fallen into the toilet on all of their streaming television services as well, this is clearly something the majority of the fans and the audiences do not want. But hey, I guess I was wrong about Kevin Feige. He absolutely is possessed by the spirit of the age after all, and it turns out he will double down on woke going forward, no matter how much it costs the company. Now, as you can see over here from the headline over at the Wrap, Kevin Feige stands by Marvel's diversity. Marvel is the world outside your window. I said this before woke and DI became a thing, and I'm still saying it after. And of course, thatparkplace.com. Kevin Feige insists Marvel isn't woke, as studio doubles down on diversity-driven stories and characters. Well, boys and girls, like we've said 1,000,000 times before around here, what is our definition of woke? When you decide to take your own personal agenda and prioritize it over good storytelling. It's race swapping for the sake of race swapping. It's gender swapping for the sake of gender swapping. Not because it actually makes sense for the story, not because you've come up with some new creative idea that this character looking a specific way or being a specific gender might end up fitting better your storytelling. No, it is literally just for that exciting thing to happen. And it's not just on screen that this happens. Over there at Kevin Feige's Marvel, this happens behind the scenes all of the time. It also happens over there at Star Wars with Kathleen Kennedy. They hire people that aren't qualified for the jobs. I mean, Captain America, Brave New World was a prime example of that. They literally had to fire the director, although they didn't do it publicly. They literally had to fire the director halfway through the filming because the guy wasn't qualified for the job, and they gave him hundreds of millions of dollars. It's the reason why they had to reshoot the entire movie last summer. Because based on immutable characteristics, Kevin Feige, Marvel, and the rest of the majority of Hollywood out there has been hiring people who aren't qualified for the jobs. And you have seen the results of that. You have seen the disastrous dumpster fires. You have seen the ratings. You have seen the fan hate be driven over and over and over again for the abominations that they put out there. And guess what, boys and girls? Kevin Feige is doubling down. So it's going to be full MCU ahead, or he's completely lying and this is just marketing to keep himself in line with all of the cult activists out there. But at the end of the day, we have to take him at his very face value and the words that are coming out of his mouth. We can't read his mind. So guess what? Kevin Feige says woke isn't dead at Marvel, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about here today, boys and girls. But before we do, and also we're going to show you how much of a disastrous dumpster fire that has been for Marvel going forward so far, and why they would continue to do this, I'll never have any idea. But before we do, if you do enjoy our content, hit that like button, share with all your friends, and subscribe or follow if you have not already, boys and girls, because we just crossed 2K. We're sailing our way towards 2,100. I think we're at 2075, so we're like 25 away from 2,100, and I could not do that without every single one of you. Also, leave us a comment in the section down below. Let me know what you think about this. Does it surprise you at all that Kevin Feige is publicly doubling down on all of the woke garbage, all of the diversity, inclusion, and equity nonsense that has driven the company and most of Hollywood all the way into the toilet? Do you think this is just a bunch of BS that he's just putting out there to keep all of the crazy psychopaths out there on social media at bay? Or do you think he's a true believer and is fully down with the activists of the cult? Let us know what you think about all that in the comment section down below. If you want to support the channel, please check out the links in the description as well. All right, from that Park Place and our dear sweet Marvin Montanaro. Now, we will jump over to the Wrap article for a couple of things out there, but that Park Place gives us a really great example and a doubling down and gives us a history of how much of a disastrous dumpster fire this DIE nonsense has been for Disney Marvel. In a recent interview, Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige pushed back against the critics, accusing the Marvel Cinematic Universe of embracing a woke agenda, particularly in its emphasis on diversity and female-led narratives following Avengers Endgame. Feige's comments come at a time when the franchise has faced declining box office returns, with several high-profile projects underperforming despite heavy promotion of inclusive storytelling. I mean, do we have to talk about the Marvels? I think we've talked about that movie in nauseam, but literally, that movie cost Disney Marvel hundreds of millions of dollars at box office. It was the worst performing Marvel movie ever. And what did it star? 3 diversity hires, one character that didn't even represent the original source material in the way that fans wanted, right? Another gender swap. And then a bunch of characters that one of them was part of a comic book run that failed miserably. I know, it's this strange concept. If the characters don't sell comic books, they probably won't sell movie tickets either. But when your agenda prioritizes the color of someone's skin and not the content of their character or good storytelling, well, this is what you get. And, well, it flopped there, and it's going to flop now. So Kevin Feige says, I said this before woke and DEI became a thing, and I'm still saying it. Marvel is the world outside your window. Is it? What if you live in the middle of Kansas or in the middle of Missouri or in the middle of Minnesota? Does Marvel, current Marvel, really represent the people you see around you every day? Or does it only represent the bubbles that Kevin Feige and people in Hollywood actually live in? Well, it's not Gotham City and Metropolis. Are you trying to tell me Gotham City and Metropolis aren't diverse? I mean, we've literally got the Justice League, Jon Stewart, anybody? Superman's an alien. We've got the the Martian Manhunter, who's a literal Martian. So explain to me who's more diverse. Because Spider-Man universe, not so diverse if you look at his characters. Captain America, yeah, set during World War II, not so diverse back then either. So stop trying to throw shade at DC, Kevin Feige, when you're trying to cover up for your own garbage and trying to say what you're essentially trying to accuse DC of being just a bunch of white boys. Clearly you've never read a DC comic, but honestly, in a lot of cases, I don't think you've actually read any good Marvel comics either, truth be told. This is New York and LA. And yes, there's also Wakanda and Asgard. Yeah, because, I'd imagine a place based on Norse mythology is supposed to be real diverse. Valkyrie? Anyone? But it's all made up of people who are making up our world. And there's the key line. Whether he meant it this way or not, that's what it always comes down to. Our world. His world. Their world. It's always this way because they can't see outside of their bubble. Kevin Feige can't understand why Miss Marvel, up until recently, had the lowest ratings in the history of Disney Marvel. Kevin Feige wants to blame the fans for why the Marvels flopped because they didn't show up. I won't expand on that any more than that because that's going to be a whole nother video because this interview has literally just given us loads of stuff to talk about because Kevin Feige can't help but blame everybody but himself and not admit to the giant elephant in the room. They're race swapping, gender swapping, and girl boss characters that nobody can stand, literal Mary Sues, don't sell with general audiences. And that mythical modern audience you've been chasing doesn't show up and watch or buy any of your stuff either. If that was the case, all of your merchandise wouldn't be sitting at shelves on Ollie's taking up 2 whole aisles. Okay? Your box office disasters wouldn't be out there being completely and totally trashed. Right? Guess who showed up? Remember, you're trying to, just like Kathleen Kennedy tried to do with Star Wars and turned into a girls brand, Kevin Feige has tried to do the exact same thing with Marvel. How'd that work out for you with the Marvels? Because guess who showed up more than anybody else? Men. Women, your movie that you were making for women, trying to draw in that female audience, how did that work out for you? Less women showed up to that movie than men, and by a significant number, and less women showed up to that movie than a good majority of the other Marvel movies out there. So, yeah, how's that working out for you? This remark echoes sentiments Feige has expressed before, framing Marvel's content as a reflection of real-world diversity rather than ideological pandering, which we know is BS. He also expressed pride in characters like Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan, by praying to Amon Villani, calling her one of the greatest bits of casting we've ever done. And honestly, I like Amon Villani. I think she's a wonderful girl. I think she's smarter than 90% of the rest of the actresses out there in Hollywood, because that girl can dodge and weave nonsense questions like nobody's business, dude. She like straight up saw through some Hollywood trying to bait her into basically like fan blaming for the fact that her show didn't do very well, or that maybe she's not very liked, and trying to basically get her to say that all the Marvel fans are racist out there. She was like, no, lady was an absolute class act. I did a video over it. She impressed me so much, but of course, positive stuff doesn't always do that well on the algorithm. But needless to say, I praised her for her interview, for her tactics. She's great. She's wonderful. The problem has never been her. The problem has never been really any of these actresses, unless they open up their big mouths and say something stupid, and then they just screw themselves. It's always been the characters that they have decided to tell stories around, right? I mean, there was even a joke in the Daredevil series, right, in season 4 of Daredevil that just came out last year, where like Murdoch's like, the guy, you meet Amon Villani's dad in the series. He's like, he's in there just for a moment and for like one episode. But he's like, oh, you don't know my daughter? She's a superhero. She hangs out with Captain Marvel. And he's like, nope, never heard of her. And I'm like, yeah, no, neither had 99.9% of Marvel fans out there had never heard of Kamala Khan. Why? Because her comic run lasted about this long. Because it didn't sell. Nobody cared. She was a poorly written character with an origin story that they've changed like 6 times. They tried to make her death relevant by throwing her into a Spider-Man comic, and guess what? Still nobody cared. Kamala Khan is a crap character, okay, that nobody cares about and nobody knows about. But that's not going to stop Kevin Feige. No, no, no. It's diversity and inclusion going forward. So according to Feige, Marvel isn't woke, but is doubling down on all of these failed characters. So they're doubling down on woke. The interview published by The Wrap highlights Feige's commitment to post-Endgame characters and scale-back production slate to avoid overwhelming audiences. However, skeptics argue these defense ignores the financial realities facing the MCU, where films emphasizing progressive themes have struggled to resonate with broader audiences. And that's really, they've literally like, I'm just going to tell you something here flat out right now. There is no such thing as superhero fatigue. You want to know how? Because the horror genre has been going on consistently since literally Nosferatu hit theaters back in the black and white silent movie days. Okay? Horror has always been a consistent draw at the box office. And for the brief moment of time that a bunch of horror franchises decided they wanted to go woke, it lasted all of 5 seconds before they immediately turned things around. Right? Because horror movies consistently make money for a couple of different reasons. One, hardcore horror fans will see just about anything. Almost like a similarity with hardcore comic book fans. They'll see just about anything. Okay? The other aspect of that is horror movies are generally cheap to make. They don't cost a lot. And they still consistently do well. Right? The real problem with Marvel is the fact that they spend $300 to $400 million on every single product that they produce. Doesn't matter if it's a movie. Doesn't matter if it's a television show. None of it. $300 to $400 million at minimum. And that's only if they don't have to reshoot the entire movie. Captain America, Brave New World. Right? And so it's one of those situations where you continue to do that and it's not going to work. It's going to fail absolutely miserably, just like it has every single other time in the past. It does not work at all whatsoever. Since Avengers Endgame, which has grossed over $2.79 billion worldwide and marked the peak of the MCU's cultural dominance, Marvel has pivoted heavily toward more diverse ensembles, co-leads, and solo outings for female heroes. Out of the 13 post-Endgame theatrical releases up to mid-2025, 7 can be classified as female-led or co-led. 7. That is over half. Over half have been wham in power. Reflecting a deliberate push that critics say has prioritized identity over compelling narratives, contributing to a string of disappointments. And it has. It's lost them so much. Black Widow, it was the lockdowns. Didn't crack $400 million globally. Eternals, remember? That was the one that the Eternals was supposed to save lives. The absolute abomination and absolute disrespect and things that make me really angry that I want to cuss really loud and say really angry things about for what they did to the disrespect to Jack Kirby. But yeah, that one. Yeah, 402 million globally. 402 million globally. Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, right? Given, that one did really, really well. It grossed $859 million as a solid but diminished return compared to the original's $1.35 billion, right? Also, all of the marketing for that movie was using T'Challa's death as an excuse to get people into theaters. And guess what? It backfired because a lot of the fans were really mad, and it didn't even cross $900 million globally, whereas the last movie made over $1.3 billion. So yeah, you're starting to see a diminishing return on this one. Thor: Love and Thunder featured Natalie Portman as Jane Foster / Mighty Thor, but earned $760 million, underperforming for the series and drawing fire for tonal shifts and perceived virtue signaling. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania continued the dynamic duo with Evangelina's Hope / The Wasp, starring the Billboard with Scott Lang. It flopped at $476 million, blamed on many by the multiverse fatigue and forced diversity elements. Notice that diminishing return. Notice how the fans kind of figured things out, right? A lot of fans complained about Thor: Love and Thunder, all of the garbage with that, all of the casting with Valkyrie, all of that kind of nonsense, right? And then you saw it obviously with Eternals, diversity, inclusion, and equity. Also, Eternals, even though I love the Eternals, I'm a big fan of Jack Kirby, Eternals is not a big draw name-wise. Thor is, though. And how did that work out? One of the most critically hated movies out there by fans, and started the decline, right? So now you've got that one, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and then of course the Marvels, diversity, inclusion, black girl magic. Literally the worst performing movie in the history of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. $200 million budget, but it only earned $206 million worldwide. That movie had easily a $300 to $400 million production budget, not to mention the marketing. And they literally yanked that movie out of the theaters after 4 weeks. They literally took my opportunity to go on for like a month and a half, almost 2 months, reporting on those box office numbers just getting worse and worse. And that's exactly why they did it, because they knew it wasn't going to get any better. They knew the decline was bad, that nobody was interested in this movie. But it doesn't matter to Kevin Feige, even though it didn't work out on the television series. How did Echo do? How did Agatha All Along do? How did Secret Wars do? How did, unfortunately, Daredevil Born Again do? By the way, them numbers since She-Hulk, literally, outside of Loki and WandaVision, the numbers have been arguably disastrous for Disney Plus, for every single one of its television shows. Why? Diversity, inclusion, and equity. Forcing characters, forcing changes for the sake of skin tone, not because it makes sense for the story. And it has cost them billions and billions and billions of dollars. Thunderbolts lost money. Captain America, Brave New World lost money. Just over and over. Streaming, we've gone over all of that. WandaVision, Hawkeye, What If, Miss Marvel, She-Hulk, Attorney at Law, all of this stuff over and over and over again. Echo, Daredevil, but of course, Deadpool and Wolverine, a movie led by not only two of the most iconic characters inside of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but also two of the most iconic actors to ever play roles in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds, Wolverine and Deadpool. That movie was guaranteed to make $1 billion no matter how nonsensical the story was, right? Why? It wasn't just because it was two white guys in leading roles. It's because it was two actors who embodied those characters. Not only do they look the part, almost identical to what we see in the comics, with the exception of the fact that Hugh Jackman's too tall, but as a character, as actors, they embody. I mean, Ryan Reynolds has been Deadpool since Blade Trinity, boys and girls. And there is no better actor we could have asked for than Hugh Jackman, who loves, adores, and embodies the character of Wolverine. The Eternals didn't do that. There isn't a single character or actor in that movie that embodies anything of the Eternals that comic book fans knew and loved for literal decades. There is nothing about Carl Danvers' versus Captain Marvel that fans appreciate. There's a reason why her series has never done very well and why they constantly have to reboot it. Once again, that is not the original Captain Marvel. That is Miss Marvel, who was very popular when she was Miss Marvel before they turned her into Captain Marvel and took the mantle from a dude and passed it to a chick. How'd that work out with Captain America, Brave New World, where now, instead of, going with the logical choice of having Bucky for a time transition into the Captain America role, no, we can't have that. Why? Because he's a white guy. So what do? We take a page out of another failed comic book run where Falcon was Captain America for a brief moment in time. A character with no super soldier serum, nothing more than some fancy tech, some wings, and a vibranium shield that he should not be able to do the kind of things he does with because he does not have the abilities that Captain America does. Right? The same reason why in comic books they always have to return to the original characters because fans don't want these diversity, inclusion, and equity changes. They don't want your diversity higher version of Captain America. They want the Captain America they've always known and loved. And Kevin Feige goes, well, it happened in the comics. They did it in the comic. That makes it okay, right? No, because those comics didn't sell. Here's a strange concept. Here's a strange idea. Take the top 10 best-selling Marvel comic book runs of all time and adapt those stories. Because I hate to tell you something you clearly don't understand, Kevin Feige. Actually, I don't hate to tell you. I love this to tell you. But I know you're not listening. It doesn't matter. But that's okay because I'm going to say it anyway because some people out there are going to understand and appreciate what we're saying. History doesn't just repeat itself. It also rhymes. Your diversity, inclusion, and equity nonsense hasn't worked so far, and it won't work in the future. But also based on the fact that history repeats itself, if you go back and you grab those 10 best comic book runs from Marvel and simply adapt them to the big screen, you'll be a success. But of course, you can't do that, Kevin Feige, because you have made deals with the devil. You have made deals with Lucifer and the spirit of the age themselves. And what does this cost you? Billions of dollars. All because you wanted to be part of the hip in crowd out there in Hollywood. Kevin Feige is much like Kevin Smith. He was probably a geek and a nerd at one point. He probably got rejected by all of the cool kids. Except when Kevin Feige was running a studio and one of them movies happened to make $1 billion. Well, now all of a sudden he gets invited to the cool kids table. And what are the cool kids table telling him? That diversity, inclusion, and equity are the new hot, trendy thing. That everybody's going to love it. And anybody that says otherwise, well, clearly they must be a racist or a bigot or a phobe. Well, guess what, Kevin Feige? It's cost you billions of dollars, and now you're stuck. And what does that mean for the future of the MCU? Well, we already knew this. Bob Iger already made this very, very apparent. While the rest of Hollywood decides to skip out and cancel diversity, inclusion, and equity, well, Marvel's Kevin Feige says they're doubling down. And the funny part about that is, what's the real question? What's the real question about how the future of all of that's going to be held? Well, guess what? Kevin Feige, in his interview with The Wrap, admits that it may be a very, very, very long time, if ever, you see these diversity, inclusion, and equity characters ever again, despite the fact that he says Marvel is going full-blown, full steam ahead with this agenda. Feige acknowledged that there may be longer intervals between characters appearing as Marvel Studios scales down its rate of production from the relentless pace seen from 2021 to 2023. Well, why are you having to slow down that relentless pace, Kevin Feige? because you've lost billions of dollars post Endgame by doing more of this diversity, inclusion, and equity. And for all of you fans out there of these characters, because they gave these characters crappy stories, you're not going to see them anytime soon. And more than likely, you're not going to see them ever again, despite the lip service Kevin Feige might be giving to the activists out there. He said that Disney and Marvel learned from that period that there's such a thing as too much for audiences and that it's okay to take a beat. It always comes down to where the best story is and which characters would be great interacting with each other. Well, clearly, your diversity hires interacting with each other didn't work out very well because peak diversity, inclusion, and equity absolutely was the Marvels. And peak diversity, inclusion, and equity, the woke agenda that Kevin Feige says they're going to continue going forward with full steam ahead over there at Marvel, was the worst performing movie in the history of Marvel. It lost them hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's exactly what you deserve. That's what Kevin Feige deserves. He has danced with the devil. He has decided to sit in line with all of the new agenda-driven garbage, the spirit of the age BS. And now, at a time where, according to the rumor mill, they're actually trying to correct things behind the scenes. They're trying to fire the activists, right? Kevin Feige says, make Daredevil like Netflix. That's what the rumor mill tells us. And there are certain things that show some of that to be true. But at the end of the day, that's all just rumor mill. We don't know that's for sure. We don't know if that's actually true or not. But what we do know beyond a shadow of a doubt is that Kevin Feige said, woke is not dead at the MCU. The diversity, inclusion, and equity, and making sure that the world he sees, the bubble that he lives in LA and New York, is exactly what the MCU is going to represent going forward. Well, guess what, Kevin Feige? The majority of the country doesn't live in your Los Angeles and New York bubble. The majority of the country lives everywhere else. That's why Donald Trump won in the fall. That's why you have lost billions of dollars at the box office. It's why you've lost billions of dollars on your streaming services out there. Because the majority of the country rejects your ideology. It rejects the ideology of the bubble and the echo chamber you live in when you only go to places like Los Angeles and New York and California. Because those people are in groupthink. And you have seen the results of that. So guess what, boys and girls? It looks like Common Nerd's going to be eating good for many years to come. Because Kevin Feige has now confirmed that woke is not dead at Marvel. It'll be more of diversity, inclusion, and equity going forward. It'll be more women power, race swapping, gender swapping, and LGBTQ nonsense. And I, for one, boys and girls, cannot wait. Kevin Feige, you have danced with the devil. You have already gotten burned, and apparently you are doubling down on 4th and 5th degrees. I, for one, cannot wait to see it because it could not have happened to a better jerk. Kevin Feige, you are going to be remembered as the worst studio head in the history of Hollywood, and I, for one, cannot wait for it. Because at the end of the day, fans decide, and fans have rejected Marvel's diversity, inclusion, and equity. Enjoy continuing to lose billions of dollars.